Hey everybody, Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. Today is Saturday, January 5th, just after 3 p.m. I have a son who just went down for a nap. It's hit or miss. These days, for a 4-year-old, they say that the nap can go away anytime between 3 and 5, and we thought that we were out of the nap cycle, but the nap has come back. And so he'll tend to fall asleep sometime around 2:30, 2:40, and then we try to get him up around 3:40. We give him about an hour because it's a real difficult kind of give and take, because if he has a long nap in the day, then he goes to bed late at night. And not to sound selfish, but I don't like staying up till 10 p.m. with a 4-year-old at the end of a long day. I know it comes across as selfish, but even the doctors will say that they should be going to bed sometime around 8 or 7:30. And you know what? That just works for me, because when do you eat dinner when they go to bed at 10? On a Friday night, you want to enjoy your dinner. We got our Mexican food last night. I tend to have a couple glasses of wine. My wife cannot now because she is pregnant, due next month, towards the end of next month, the end of February of 2019. And so it just becomes a difficult thing. You just want to have the routine of the kid going to bed around 8:15, because then you got to do the build up to bedtime. I saw someone do a funny tweet where it was like the checklist for going to bed with a toddler. And it was like, bath, pajamas, tell a story, say I love you, tell story 2, hugs, tell story 3, and it just becomes this long line of things you're doing before bedtime actually comes upon you. And that's part of the deal. You understand that. But it's a lot different when it's an 8 p.m. bedtime as opposed to a 10 p.m. You just don't even know what to do with yourself. You're kind of jamming and eating. You're having them watch stuff. But it just feels unnatural for a toddler to be up late. And our nanny will tend to let him go for an hour and a half, even sometimes longer, and I give her all the credit in the world. She can always get him to nap. She has always been able to get him to nap, even through the periods where he thought he was done napping. But she tends to watch on Fridays, and so we always fall into this. I don't mind having the later bedtime as much during the week, because it's sort of business time, and you're not looking to stay up extremely late. But on a Friday, on a Saturday, you really just kind of want to chill out a bit. You want to have the evening to relax, to not have to worry about the next day. And when you have a toddler going to bed at 10, that will automatically happen. Now, he has started sleeping in, which is nice. A few times this week, I had to actually wake him up at 7:45. And we've been able to get him to not get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, to come wake us up to go to the bathroom. So he has slept through the night a bunch of nights in a row. And you start to wonder, what was it that made that happen? Was it because we said, we'll give you a present if you stay in your bed? Was it because we decided to... So it's a whole routine with a toddler, right? Or I guess he's not a toddler now, but it's a whole routine with a 4-year-old. And it's a mind game. That's all it is, bedtime. And so what we'll do is he needs to have the door open to his bedroom when he's going to bed. If you try to close it, he'll throw a tantrum. He'll go crazy. I need it opened. So he needs that opened, and then he also needs the light to the bathroom, which is right next to his bedroom, on completely. He needs to have the full light on. Even though we have a nightlight in there, he can't just have the nightlight. He has to have the full light on. And so what'll happen is he'll then sing and roll around in his bed until he falls asleep. It's sort of his routine for going to sleep. And he'll do that. And then once he's asleep, you can kind of sneak towards the end of the hall there. You can turn off the main light in the bathroom, allow the nightlight to go on, and then you can kind of close his door over. And what we've done since he's been in this room, which has been since about the beginning of July, is we will leave the door closed all night. And it occurred to us that perhaps he's getting up at night in the middle of the night because he sort of wakes and he sees the door closed, and then really just wants to assure himself that everything's okay, so he comes out. So whether it's happenstance, coincidence, whatever the case is, we kept the door open. Once we're done with our night downstairs and we're going to go up into our room, I'll go up and I'll open his door wide open, and that door's been wide open and he has not gotten up. So I'll tell you, it's like found money this week. I've slept until 7 or 7:05, I've actually been waking up when my wife is pretty much finished getting ready to go to work. And then my son will continue to sleep till 7:30, 7:45. Pretty amazing. Now it's funny because it's it's kind of two sides of a sword, double-edged sword here, because I love the sleeping late, but he's also got to go to school 4 days a week, and you have to be out of the house around 8:05 for that. So when he's sleeping till 7:45, it just gets really hard for the routines you have to do. Because just like there's, sorry, I'm getting a little funky here. Just like there's nighttime routines, there's also morning routines. You can't just wake him up and go. You have to do a whole process where maybe he watches a little something, he puts his clothes on at a certain time, he eats his breakfast, and it takes some time. So there's like 10 to 15 minutes per all those things that you have to add up. So you kind of have to negotiate your way to school on top of it. So I'm not complaining, though. It's been great to get some sleep. And even today, we slept till 7:20 on a Saturday. So I am feeling really fresh. But yeah, it's been a nice process with that. And of course, right now he's napping. So we're going to have him nap, and then we're going to wake him up around 3:45 because that would be about an hour of sleep. And it is pouring rain right now. Little chilly, pouring rain. Not a great day for this. But the NFL playoffs begin at 4:30. So we're going to get him up around 3:45. We're going to go down to Target and get him a sled for the snowy months ahead. The sled we got last year just flat out broke on our first run. We had a good run, me in it, him on me in it, and that thing cracked because I guess we did too well. Maybe went off a jump. So we got to get him a sled, maybe get a couple things at Target, also wear him out. We're going to walk him around that Target. It's hard in the winter months to wear a kid out. It's not like the nicer months where you can go to a park and just let them run rampant for like an hour. It's just too cold and there's nowhere to go. So you got to go to the internal parks, which end up being the Targets, the supermarkets. We will sometimes go to a supermarket and just have him push around an empty cart, or we'll go to like buy a little something. Boy, this is embarrassing with my voice today. Sorry. Yeah, well, so you just try to find a way to get some steps in, to wear out some steps. And so today we're going to do that with Target. We'll walk around, maybe pick up a couple things, as well as the sled. And then we're going to either slide over to the Buffalo Wild Wings, which is in the Rockaway Mall complex there, or we're going to go up 15 and go to the Tap House 15. And we'll get a nice dinner as a family, and we'll watch some of the early game, which is Houston, Indianapolis. Usually those early games are not very good, and they usually include teams like this, but this one's great because you got two quarterbacks. You got Andrew Luck and you got Deshaun Watson. You got a great defense on the part of Houston, and you have an up-and-coming team built around the, 30-year-old quarterback Andrew Luck. So this is a good game. Anytime you got real quarterbacks at play, you never know what's going to happen. The quarterback is always the trump card, and if you have the quarterback and the other team doesn't, no matter what you do, you're really not going to win. So when you got two quarterbacks, you don't know what's going to happen, and it's going to be tremendous. So we'll start to watch that, get some dinner, and then get back home at a suitable time. Hopefully we will have worn him off enough that he can go to bed around 8:30. So keeping that nap at an hour will be a major key. Boy, I had a tough December. I talked to you a few times in December, but the night of one of the podcasts where I did a podcast with Matt O'Daniels about the college football bowl season, that night I started feeling bad. That day I started feeling bad. I almost felt a bloat in my stomach, like something wasn't right. It wasn't like nausea or sickness, but it was like something's not right in my stomach. It was kind of seizing my stomach, like almost grabbing it in certain places, and you never know when the grab was going to come. It just didn't feel right. And that night with Matt O'Daniels, I had eaten half a pizza, which I tend to do. That's not out of the norm to eat half a pizza, 4 slices, some garlic knots, normal dinner, but there was something that wasn't sitting right. And so I played through injuries. I went through that podcast, and then when it was over, I was just really nauseous. And then the next day I woke up and I was extremely sick. I almost felt like I could have thrown up or coming out the other end, whatever it is. I just felt terrible. And it was making me think, is it some kind of food I ate in the last couple days? I didn't know. I don't get a lot of intestinal distress a lot of times, but I ended up taken that day off of work, and I went and saw the doctor, and they said, yeah, it looks like it could just be a stomach bug. Nothing else is funny. So just, it'll work its way out 2 days, 3 days as they normally do. They usually call it the 24-hour stomach bug. At that point, it basically wears itself out where you don't feel it as much. So I listened to that. I went home, and I just continued to feel nauseous. I woke up the next day, and I actually felt like I was going to throw up. Now, the whole time, I don't want to get too graphic, the whole time, the other end is just blowing up. Can't keep anything in. It's just waterworks, if you will, and just awful feeling. I couldn't eat. I tried, and it just wasn't happening. So that second day, I took off again, and that day, I just stayed in bed. And I didn't even drink caffeine that day. I didn't eat like anything. I just had decaffeinated tea, Earl Grey tea, and a couple of pieces of raisin toast, and that was it for the whole day. And when you're sick like that, you always think you're just going to come out of it, right? And it gets really annoying. You feel an impatience when you don't get out of it, and you're just like, well, I was told there's nothing up here. I don't know what's going on. And so it's just going on and on. And that was on a Thursday, and I just stayed in bed the whole day. So you think when you put that much time in on rest, you're going to be fine. You're going to come out the other end and be fine. And so I woke up that Friday. I got a coffee finally. I never had a caffeine headache like I had the day before. I realized I have not missed having a cup of coffee of some sort in 20 to 25 years probably. At least 20 years. I mean, just every day. So when I didn't do it that one day, that decaf tea made my body think everything was going to be okay. But then when it didn't get that caffeine payoff, I had the worst headache I've ever had in my life. It was like a migraine headache. It's amazing what caffeine does, the way it kind of assimilates in your brain and hooks to the nodes and all that stuff. Unbelievable. So that next day when I had that Dunkin' Donuts coffee, I was like, oh, this is so good. But went about my day, and I just still wasn't feeling right. And I continued to not feel right. A week later, I still feel terrible. I'm still having a terrible time. So I went back to the doctor, saw the other doctor at this practice, this nurse. It's actually a nurse's practitioner practice, which you realize a lot can get done with a nurse practitioner. So in an innovative way, these folks built their own little practice just being nurse practitioners. And I went back to the other one, and she's like, this is just strange. I don't see anything. And so she said, let's do a test for C. diff. And I'm like, oh God, what does that mean? She's like, this is almost like MRSA, right? It's like where you have this antibiotic resistant bug in the form of MRSA, and C. diff is almost an antibiotic resistant stomach bug, or it's a stomach bug that's created almost on the back of antibiotics. So nothing you really take for the most part can help it. And so there's apparently a specific antibiotic you can take that actually can get to C. diff. But it was only supposed to be the type of thing you could get in a hospital. And here I am going about my day, not doing anything funny. And I just didn't feel right forever. It was awful. And I felt like I could never get over the hump. And so the doctor said, all right, you're going to have to do some tests. I'm like, tests? What does that mean? And she's like, you're going to have to get us stool samples. And I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And so then she goes about showing me how I'm supposed to get it. And I'm just like, this is gross. And she's like, you know what? You just got to get like like a Tupperware or something that you're going to throw out, and you got to squat. And I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, not to get too graphic, but you can't just go normally and then somehow fish it out. Like, you got to get a fresh sample. So I'm just like, I feel gross. I'm just disgusted that I have to do this, but I also want to get this sample as quick as possible so I could get it there, so I could get it tested. We were going into the Christmas break, so I probably wasn't going to get this test result forever. So I at least want to get it that day. And it's just on my mind the whole time. I go over to Cloveberry, which is next door to this nurse practitioners. I get my coffee because I'm like, well, maybe this will help me move it along. And so then I have my coffee. I come home, and I'm just sitting around waiting. I almost felt like Walter White in Breaking Bad, but instead of meth, I'm going to have to get the sample. It was gross. And so I sort of decided upon those, the sternos, and then you got the little platters that the sternos light up. So I thought, this is so gross, but I don't want to do something where anything's going to make a mess. I want everything to be gotten. And it was like, I was having stage fright. I didn't want to do this. I was disgusted. This is one of those moments where you come face to face with all the things we hide about being human, right? We act like nobody goes to the bathroom. We act like nobody makes love behind closed doors. We act like nobody does any of this stuff, especially bathroom stuff. And we do it. And when you have to capture it without it going and being flushed, you're disgusted. So I can't get over this. I'm a clean freak. I don't like this. So the time came and I was like, all right, here we go. So I get my sterno platter. I go into the bathroom, stick it on there, and I went. And then it's totally gross. It's totally smell. It's the worst thing ever. And then you have to get she gave me 4 little vials that I have to put samples in, and talk about vial, because that's what it was. And so then I'm like putting on gloves, and I'm like putting on a face mask. I'm breathing through my mouth, and I'm getting these samples and then dropping them, and you got to fill them up to a certain line. And I was like, oh God, no. Oh God, no. Did I not get enough? And I just got enough, and I was disgusted. And I had to then bring it back to the practitioners, and she's like, why don't you make sure you brown bag it, because our people don't really like handling it. It's like, well, thanks. I mean, your doctor's office or whatever you are, you please handle it. And so I put it in the little bag they gave. Oh, it was so gross. And I put it in the paper bag, and I brought it in. And that was on a Thursday, I think. I took that day, obviously, for this momentous event. And I handed it in, and the woman's like, oh, that's weird. You're bringing it back? The doc's not here. I'm like, yeah. She goes, is it urine? I'm like, no. She goes, okay, let me take it. Handed it off, and I felt a little better about my day. But it continued. And that was on a Thursday. Now, Saturday, for whatever reason, I mean, what is that? 10, 12 days after this started. This doesn't last that long. 10, 12 days after this started, that Saturday, right before Christmas, it turned, and you just felt better. Things weren't exactly right, but you know, when you're sick, you know that feeling, you know you've turned it. And you might have some of the underlying symptoms still around. You might still be exhibiting many of the traits of the sickness that you were before you had turned the corner, but internally, you know, you turned a corner. You almost know your immune system got the better of it now. It's going to start cleaning things up. It'll take a little time, but it'll start cleaning things up. So that was a hard one to work through. But I'll tell you what, I watched a lot of the Basketball: A Love Story, which is like a 20-hour, 30 for 30 like ESPN Films type of deal. Speaking of 30 for 30, Bill Simmons appears in this thing at certain times, but it is a 20-hour special with 5 to 12-minute vignettes about different basketball stories. So it's Basketball: A Love Story. It's done by Dan Flores. And it's good. It's so long, though, because you watch these things, you just want to finish them. I feel sort of like what I was talking about with the Netflix, and how I'm kind of into the fact that they're doing movies now, because the investment is not as intense as having to watch a 12 or 13 episode, 12 or 13 hour TV show that Netflix puts out, where you maybe have only time for the hour or 2 hours and you can clear it, but then it takes 7 months to finish the rest of it, if you remember that you were watching it. This one's kind of like that. I like when documentaries are that 2 hours where you can kind of clear them that day. This one is an investment, and you got to remember you were watching it and remember where you were. So I was watching a lot of that on the ESPN Plus. I have subscribed to that. It's like $5 a month. It gives you all the 30 for 30s. It gives you a lot of kind of ancillary games you could watch in college sports and baseball, and it gives you a little extra. It's on top of your normal ESPN. But I did that because it's $4.99 a month, not terrible. I am a cord cutter now. And it also gives you access to the old ESPN Insider articles. So you can read all articles within ESPN, all some of the good analytical stuff that is behind a paywall, and used to be behind one in ESPN Insider. You can read your Kevin Peltons. You can read a lot of that stuff. So I did it for that. And so I was watching it through that. So the only issue with that is if you watched it on TV, you get your 2-hour block of the show or 3-hour block of the show, and then it just plays all these vignettes with commercials between. When you watch it on the ESPN Plus app, you have to press play on each little vignette, and it starts with a little commercial, and then it goes through the vignette, but then kicks you back out into the Basketball Love Story Index to then go to the next one. So it doesn't feel as kind of fluid watching it, but it's very good, especially some of the early NBA stuff where you're not really as aware as you are to the current. Although I'm getting very interested in getting up towards the current too, because I want to get into some of the LeBron Miami years and kind of relive a lot of that stuff, relive a lot of the mid 2000s. So I am kind of looking forward to that. And it's funny because I'm also reading at the same time that Ian Thompson book that came out called The Soul of Basketball. And it's mostly about the 2010 season when LeBron went to Miami. Dirk won the championship with the Mavericks over Miami. That was the one championship Jason Kidd got, as well as sort of a major bit player when he became more of the kind of stand-aside three-point shooter on the driving kicks from Dirk. And he did become that to a pretty high level, which was always amazing. But this Soul of Basketball book, it's a nice read, good book. A lot of insights into things that are the near past that you might have forgotten about. I mean, it was amazing how much was on the line for Pat Riley during that period where LeBron was making the decision. He had basically built the team to accept these players all at one time. Chris Bosh, keep Dwayne Wade, and then obviously LeBron James. But you had to put a lot on the line to do that. He had 2 players left. So if that didn't happen, he would have had to build the team with only 2 players. So it was amazing. The other kind of neat thing was that LeBron apparently didn't like that the Knicks, that their focus in the meetings was on making him a billion-dollar basketball player. He wanted the winning, and it wasn't that much of something that was interesting him with the money aspect. He figures he could do that on his own anyway. So that's been a very good book. I'm about 50% of the way through still right now. A lot on Dirk, which is interesting. One of the neat things, Dirk always, you always hear about the guy who was sort of his mentor through the years. Holzer or something like that. The amazing thing with that guy is he is 2 steps basically from James Naismith. So when he was learning basketball at a boarding school, I believe, he was being taught by a coach who happened to go to Springfield College. It was a different college at the time. And it was the college where Naismith, I think, basically invented basketball. And this guy actually came in contact with Naismith, I think 2 times over 1 year there. So it's kind of funny that this weird connection, this weird global connection via Germany, where you think Dirk is this outsider presence, this European who is not a part of the American game and really revolutionized a lot of it himself, being this 7-foot kind of Larry Bird shooter, this dribbler, this guy who did things that were unconventional for a 7-footer, really changed the conception of the game and was on the vanguard of like really where we're kind of going. But you think he's this outsider, and then you look around and he's only 1 or 2 steps from James Naismith, the guy who invented the game. So really very, very interesting. We'll get to a little bit of basketball, but I wanted to talk about my picks. So obviously the NFL playoffs begin today. So I'm not going to talk about that, and then maybe one person listens to it before the games, and we'll see how that goes. We do have the Texans and the Colts, as I said. We have is tonight the, let me make sure here. Tonight is the Seahawks at Cowboys. That is a great game. Tomorrow, Chargers at Ravens, and then after that, Eagles at Bears. Phenomenal wild card weekend. You just don't get this many great games right off the bat that could mean so much. But I wanted to go back over some of my season totals and just kind of go from there. So in the picks league I'm in, picks against the spread, I ended up 94 and 93 on my picks, and that was with a 9-2 week 17. And I came in 4th in the league for that, going 9-2, and I amassed about 100 points. Seattle hurt me there. Seattle did beat Arizona, but they had a bigger line. They only won by 3? And Seattle was, I think, my 16-point game. So if I won that Seattle game, I would have been at 116. I might have won for the week. But I ended a little bit strong. I had a 6-5 week week before, but unfortunately my 4 best picks were losers, so I didn't get a ton of points. But I ended up 94 and 93. That's the funny thing about betting, is you were right once more. You lost 93 times, but you won 94. It's just sort of the way it works. It's why the spread is such an amazing invention, and how on Vegas is with their picks with that, understanding how many points are needed. And sometimes you read it and you're like, I don't understand how this team can have this much of an advantage, or how this team can only be a 1-point favorite. They're so much better, and Vegas usually wins. They usually understand, and then you usually, the house wins a lot of times. So the other thing I wanted to kind of talk about was how my season picks did, right? So I do that podcast at the beginning of the season with Tim Castano, the wins over unders. I did pretty well. I think by my counting, I did 18, 12, and 2. And if you want to say 17, 13, and 2, I guess. But I think I went 18, 12, and 2, being nice. So let's look over those picks. With Arizona Cardinals, I actually saw them going 5 and 9. The over-under was 5.5, and they went 3 and 13. So I was good there. very strange season there. Sam Bradford did not work out. Steve Wilkes is gone after one season. We'll have to see who goes there in the marriage with Josh Rosen. Atlanta Falcons, that was a tough one. I had them going 10-6, and I said a conservative 10-6. And they went 7-9, and that 7-9 almost feels even a little better than it felt for the season. Their over-under number was 9. I thought I was going to be easy on that one. That was a tough division there with teams who did really well last year. That was a division that had 3 playoff teams, and I think all 3 teams had 10 or more wins. Then we got the Baltimore Ravens. I had them going 9-7. The number was 8. So I won that one. They ended up going 10-6, and they're going to be a fun wild card to watch here with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback, because it is a true wild card on a wild card weekend. You cannot game plan for Lamar Jackson. It's almost like going against a knuckleballer, and you have to hope that things are flat that day. You have to hope the weather patterns are how they are. You have to hope you can contain him, because he could have a short career, but he can have a tremendous playoff, because he can just break a game open with one run, and then the fear of that one run could make a pass here or there go the length of the field. So they ended up above the number. They ended up at 10. That's a good number there. The Bills I had going 5-11, and they were a 6 win. They went 6-10, so that's a push on that number there. The Carolina Panthers, I had them going 10-6. Their number was 9. They went 7-9. Just sort of like it's funny, the Falcons and they were very similar last year. They're very similar this year. The Carolina Panthers, I talked about the Bears. That was a big one. I had them going 6-10. The number was 6.5. And I had no idea, I think, how impactful Khalil Mack would end up being there. And it was very impactful. And I don't even think he played all the games, but just his presence on that team was Garnett-like, almost going to the Celtics. Unbelievable. So they went 12-4, really impressive. Cincinnati Bengals, I had going 7-9. They were a 6.5 point over-under, and they ended up 6-10. So I was just on the wrong side of that one. And look, if Andy Dalton doesn't go down at that point, they might get to their number. They might go 7-9. They might go 8-8, because they started out well, I think. Weren't they like 3-0 or 4-0 or something like that? Next up, Cleveland Browns, I was wrong on. I got burned on them the year before, and I wasn't sure how things were going to play out in terms of Baker Mayfield and Tyrod Taylor. And so regardless, they were a 5.5, and they were a game and a half over. They were 7-8-1. Really nice season. We'll have to see if they can continue things next year and potentially be a playoff team, as you would expect, as they will probably have a new coach as well. So it would be very Browns to go backwards next year, but I think with the right mix and with Baker Mayfield's kind of passion and leadership abilities, that they should be a playoff team next year. So I was wrong there. So at this point I was 2-5-1, and I was worried as I was going through this, because I was like, man, this is going to end up a bad season. But then I had a run similar to the Dallas Cowboys, who were the next team. I had them going 9-7, but I wrote that I was not sure where I stood on them. Now, things really changed. The over-under was 8.5. They ended up 10-6. Things obviously changed, as they usually do not change with an in-season trade. Amari Cooper helped open up that offense and helped things flourish there, so I was right there. The Broncos went 6-10. I had them going 6-10. The number was 7, so I won that one because I was on the under. They're sort of a mess. They were built to have an elite quarterback, as they had Peyton Manning before, and a great quarterback means so much in the league. It is honestly the difference between 6 wins and 10-12 wins. Always is. That's a huge deal. Detroit Lions, I had them going 9-7, and they went 6-10, over under 7.5. They really underwhelmed this year. Matt Patricia might be on the hot seat already in year 2. Green Bay Packers, I had them going 11-5. The over-under was 10, and they went 6-9-1. That was a real down season for the Packers. Mike McCarthy's out. We'll have to see who comes in to be the head coach there. We'll have to see how Aaron Rodgers bounces back. Seemed the knee injury he had early on in game 1, where it looked like he was out for the season, and then he kind of played his way back. That knee injury seemed to dissipate as the year went on, but who will ever know? You will have a fresh 35, 36-year-old quarterback next year. He should be able to play out a couple more years at a high level. We'll have to see what a new coach means there. Houston Texans, big one. I had them going 9-7 with an 8.5 over under. They ended up 11-5, and that was after beginning 0-3. Deshaun Watson is a tremendous quarterback and a leader and a winner. And to find themselves at 11-5 in a season where their owner died, McNair, really good season for them and a good season for me. They gave me some buffer. Indianapolis Colts, 6.5 over under. I had them going 7-9, but I wrote that a healthy Luck and they could be over that, and they did. They ended up 10-6, and at some point, weren't they like 2-5 or something like that? They were similarly down early in the season as Houston, and they really bounced back. To get 10 wins when you're at that low point is something else. I mean, I even think back to that game the Eagles beat them, and they had one last chance at the end for a Hail Mary, and they removed Luck and put in the backup, which was that Brissett at that point? They put in the backup, and everyone's like, oh, is his shoulder, are we sure it's okay? And it was like, they just don't want to air it out. They don't want to put that much pressure on it. So they overplayed there. Always good to have great quarterbacks in the mix in the playoffs winning. Very good. Jacksonville Jaguars proved they do not have a quarterback, even though people were possibly thinking they might. I had them going 9-7. The over-under was 9. I probably would have gone on the over. That's where I didn't take this. I did not take this win. So they went 5-11. Things really fell apart there. And Leonard Fournette, who was their big pick last year, was one of these guys having a bad moment on the bench where it looked like they didn't care at the end there. So that's bad. Kansas City, I had them going 10-6. And I wrote, feels like an easy schedule. And then we had no idea that Patrick Mahomes was going to be as impactful as he was. He will probably be the MVP this year. They were an 8.5 over under. They ended up 12-4. They probably could have even been a little better. But I think going 12-4 might be a good thing for them in the playoffs because Andy Reid tends to underwhelm, but he's never had a quarterback this impactful and this good. Los Angeles Chargers, I had going 10-6. It was a 9.5 over under, and they went 12-4. Very good season for them. Just really was. You were wondering if they were going to continue to be a little down because of that almost home field disadvantage of playing in the soccer stadium, but they had a lot of big road wins, including at Pittsburgh, including at Kansas City, and there's one other I'm not thinking of, but they had a lot of grit and heart. They're a good team. Los Angeles Rams, I had going 11-5, but I didn't feel overly confident. Well, I should have been a little more confident because their over-under was 10, and they ended up 13-3. I still won that one. Miami Dolphins, I had going 5-11, and the over-under was 6.5, and they ended up going 7-9. But it felt like it should be worse. They really pushed up to get to 7, including that crazy kind of hook and ladder play to win that game against New England is unbelievable. To only have 7-9, that is a hell of a win, dying on the field for a 7-9 season. Minnesota Vikings, I had I wrote 10-6, but I said I'd probably bet the under, so I'm giving myself credit for that. They won 13 last year with Case Keenum. This year, the over-under was 10, and they went a very disappointing 8-7-1, and you're even wondering what the heck is going to happen with Kirk Cousins after getting $84 million guaranteed. That is a tough spot. Next up, New England Patriots, the Metronome. I had them going 11-5. The over-under was 11, and they went 11-5, so that's a push. New Orleans Saints, I had them going 10-6. I said they could go 9-7. I thought the schedule might play out a little differently, especially because I thought Atlanta and Carolina would be a little better, and being in the same division, that's 4 games. And their over-under was 9-5, but I said 10, and they went 13-3, so that was a win for me. Very impressive season. Very impressive couple of drafts the last few years. Adding Michael Thomas, adding Alvin Kamara. Really impressive. New York Giants. I had them going 7-9, and I felt bad about that because I want to root for the team locally. That's the team I like. And after all they did, after they brought in Saquon Barkley, bringing back Eli, knowing that they're going to have Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard and Odell Beckham and that everything would be good, they won 3 games last year, and the over-under was 7, and you're like, well, 7? That doesn't feel right with how much buzz is around this team. Well, they went 5-11, so they were on the under there. Real disappointing season, and I think there's got to be a lot of changes for next year, and I unfortunately mean that Eli has to be. When you're looking at a league that is so built on quarterbacks and is so friendly to quarterbacks with the rules, you got to get more from your quarterback in terms of wins. Quarterbacks mean wins and losses. Look at Andrew Luck. Look at Deshaun Watson. Great quarterbacks mean wins and losses. And so when you're not getting wins and you're getting a lot of losses, you got to look at the quarterback. No matter what the stats say, there's the eye test and there's the Bill Parcells, were you a good or bad team? I don't know. Look at the record type of deal. New York Jets, they went 5. They won 5 last year. I had them going 5-11, which would be under the 6, and they went 4-12. Really disappointing, but now they'll get the chance to bring in a head coach to marry with Sam Darnold and hopefully find a similar progression as we had with Jared Goff in Los Angeles, going from Jeff Fisher to Sean McVay. Now, if they could get their Sean McVay, that's tremendous. But even if they could get 75% of Sean McVay, that will be very helpful. I've kind of liked Gase in that position. I've come around to the McCarthy idea. Colin Cowherd was very on that, kind of comparing Darnold in some ways to Aaron Rodgers. I think McCarthy might be a good mix there. Even though I was not that intrigued, I've been convinced into it a little bit. Oakland Raiders, and I wrote, why am I quite under on this one with an 8 over-under in wins? They won 6 the year before, and they went 4-12, and that 4-12 is almost better than it looked in some ways. They did win their final game there in Oakland. Who knows where they're going to play next year, but I was under on that. Yes, they traded Khalil Mack. Yes, they traded Amari Cooper. They probably they did trade their best defensive player, and they traded probably one of their top 3 important offensive players. That can happen, but it is weird. It's almost like it was a leveraged buyout with Gruden getting paid and coming in to almost tear this thing down the way like a Bain Capital might, or one of these venture or leveraged buyout companies. Philadelphia Eagles, they ended up, their number was 10. I had them going 9-7. They won 13 last year. They did go 9-7, so I was right on that under, even though they did make the playoffs. Pittsburgh, I had going 11-5. It was a 10.5 over under, and they went 9-6-1. So even if they didn't have that tie and had a win there, they would have been on the under. Very, very disappointing season there. A lot of fireworks. We'll have to see what goes on with Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin, Le'Veon Bell. Who knows? It's a lot of kind of histrionics over there that will take some time to sort through. San Francisco 49ers, I had them going 9-7, obviously because Jimmy Garoppolo was their quarterback, and that was an 8.5 over under. They went from 6, but I think they went 5-0 down the stretch the year before with Jimmy Garoppolo. And so I thought, let's be conservative, but I think 9-7, it would have been on the over. They went 4-12 because they lost Jimmy Garoppolo. Nick Mullins had some moments, of course, but they need to have their main quarterback. So that's almost an unfair pick. That's one of those, if you were to tell me Jimmy Garoppolo was going to be out that early in the season, I would have had a different feeling about that pick. Seattle Seahawks, I had going... I had them going on the over at 8. They won 9 the year before, and they went 10-6. Very impressive. Again, the importance of a quarterback. Having a great quarterback covers so many sins. Next up, Tampa Bay, where they did not have a great quarterback, even though they think they have one. I had them going 4-12. They ended up 5-11. Their number was 6.5 on the over/under. So they're just, I don't know what's going on there. And that was with spotting a win or two with Ryan Fitzmagic on the prowl. Next up, another team where you're not sure. Same draft, 1-2, right, with Tennessee Titans and Marcus Mariota. I had them going 7-9. It was an over/under on 8. They ended up 9-7, but they did not make the playoffs. So they sort of had a nice season to get to 9-7. They won 9 the year before. Did the coaching change make a huge difference? Was Marcus Mariota out too much? What is their team? It's hard to tell sometimes, but I lost that one even though it was a similar feeling to how I thought it would end up. Washington Redskins, I had them going 6-10. Their number was over/under was 7. That's one of those where in opposition to the Jimmy Garoppolo thing, where I had them as over because of him. For some reason, I had them as under, even with Alex Smith being a very competent game manager and quarterback in season, but I had them going 6-10, and they went 7-9, and they probably would have been even better if Alex Smith did not break his leg in half towards the middle to end of the season. So that was something that that was something that played out a little interesting. You win some, you lose some. Not to say I'm winning and losing on players' injuries, but ended up 18-12-2. So I feel really good about that. Pretty good above 500 there. That's a nice season record. I would probably make the playoffs. And then if I'd put real money up, I probably would have made some nice money. And then 94-93, I was one game better than as a winner than a loser in the picks over the season. I had some really good weeks too, but I had some bad weeks. That's just sort of how it all works. So I wanted to talk a little with the NBA. So the Warriors are kind of going through this period where it's like it doesn't feel like things are hitting. A lot of people are like Mike Francesa's of the world are saying this is where this thing ends. Book it. I don't think this is where it ends. They're still 25-14 as of today, as of Saturday, January 5th, with as bad as things have felt. And that's 15-6 at home. It's crazy. They don't lose that many home games, but they've lost like 3 in a row at home, including 2 at the last second. They're 15-6. They're still a plus 4.5 point differential, scoring 116 a game. They're going to be fine. They're going to be totally fine. They're just so worn out on playing at the highest levels that when you have to get to this point, regular season, you just don't buckle down the same. I've sort of likened it to, in my head, to marriage, right? So you love who you're married to, but do you show the same amount of effort and care and intensity and collaboration as you do on your honeymoon as you do 8 years in? Probably not. You fall back on a lot of your bad habits. You maybe push the envelope on things that are the significant other's bad habits, and you can start fights sometimes. You can end them. You always end them. You always have faith that you're going to be fine and that you're going to come out of it fine. But little things erupt conflagrations, and it just gets a little harder. You let up just a little bit. It's the human condition. It's human nature. And that's all that's happening in Golden State. It doesn't matter if Kevin Durant's going to leave to today. It just doesn't matter if he's fighting with Draymond. They're going to be fine. They're combustible, but they're phenomenal. They're combustible, but they're historical. They're going to be fine. And sometimes, you need to have a little bit of fireworks to show that there's passion still around. You need some crazy things to happen. You need to get these lessons at these periods of time where they're not high leverage moments, where it really doesn't matter. And that's what's happening with Golden State. We're going to look back and we're going to say, sure, they underwhelmed to get to just 56 wins, because they're probably going to get 56 to 58 wins again. I think they had 58 last year. They're not going to be leading the conference, I don't think. I don't think they're going to be number one. Although, let's be honest, only Oklahoma and Denver are ahead of them, and they're barely ahead of them. Golden State's only a game and a half back. So if Golden State can put these couple of fights behind them in the marriage terms, then they're going to be fine. Their honeymoon, they can have their 10-year anniversary and they can go back to the same place where they got married or where they had their honeymoon, and all of a sudden those little things rekindle about why you're with that person, why you're with those people, that group, in the NBA terms. So that's what this is. It's just the kind of everyday moments where marriages have their little hiccups, where partnerships have their little hiccups, and then you kind of get back to your stasis. You get back to your straight line with these little blips. And so that's what's going to happen. I'm not worried about them. Clay's going to be fine. Steph's going to be fine. As long as there's not injuries, they're going to be fine, because they can't afford injuries, because by being so top heavy with these players, you can't build out a roster that covers for the ills of one of those players or two of those players being out of commission. But even missing one, they could still win. It's kind of crazy. And we're seeing, again, with LeBron, he never got injured, and then he gets injured, and this groin thing happens on Christmas Day, and he's out a little more than I thought he was going to be out. I think this thing's a little worse than they let on. It's not as bad as it could have been, obviously, with a groin injury. But sometimes you never know where there's that one thing that happens that starts the decline, and missing the games and not being in the condition that you can be then leads to the next thing. And this is where I was worried about the 34-year-old, turned 34 on December 30th, the 34-year-old player making such a big commitment to a place where he had to carry the load, especially in year one. And we're seeing our guys going to come to play with him, the big guys. Is Anthony Davis the right player to come play with him? You need shooters around him. So I'm not really sure I'm not really sure where we're going to end up with that. But there's, the season's going along nicely. It is a beautiful it's a beautiful season. There's a lot of great teams playing. There's a lot of upsetting the apple cart in the standings. There's a lot of juice happening with some of the changes around the league. When you're talking about Kawhi for DeRozan, when you're talking about Giannis and what he's doing with Budenholzer as the coach, when you're seeing Indiana do what they do. It's unbelievable. You're seeing Boston drop off, but they're still 23-15. They could be fine. We're seeing the Brooklyn Nets, as of right now, being the 8th seed. That is a really nice thing to be looking at. And we're also seeing a league where I'm watching a game last night that was between Chicago and Indiana, and it was the most compelling game I've seen of shot making, overtime, Zach LaVine doing things, Victor Oladipo doing things. There's always phenomenal games. I was looking at the schedule before the games last night, and I went, oh, it's one of those nights where there's not a marquee game. I mean, you could say the Oklahoma City-Portland game was a marquee game in terms of teams on the upper echelon of the conference. They would right now be the matchup if it were today for the playoffs, Oklahoma City and Portland. Even though Portland's only 4.5 games behind number 1 seeded Denver in the number 7 seed. I mean, you look at New Orleans being in the penultimate team in the Western Conference, second to last, and they're 9.5 games out of the number 1 seed. They're only 4 games ahead of the 8th seed, so that's a tremendous conference. The parity here is unreal. But I mean, other than that, I'm looking at that schedule and I'm saying to myself, oh, Portland and Oklahoma City is sort of the game of the night, and it's not something that's amazingly compelling because neither of those teams are going to truly be there, I think, at conference finals time. So they're sort of just below the echelon of the top, maybe 2 below the echelon of the very top, if you think of the fact that Golden State's really alone at the top. But Oklahoma City, Portland is probably below a Portland even. A Houston, and Houston is ascending. Unbelievable what James Harden's doing. So it's a really nice time for the league. A lot of great storylines happening, and you just never know what's going to happen night to night in this just compelling story of NBA basketball. So I got to run. It's going to be time to go get our dinner and watch some playoff football. So friends, I appreciate it, and I will talk to you later.